Hey everyone, welcome to Riff On This, candid conversations behind the music in Florida. And if you know anything about Florida and the music, you know this is a big old state, and boy, do we have a lot of talent. But we're here for all the juicy details behind all the rhythms flowing through the genres in the Sunshine State. I'm your host, Samara Kokinas, taking a break from the weather to catch a musical vibe with you. In the studio today, I'm really excited to have a musician on hand. You may have seen him playing at brunches, lunches, fancy, even swanky parties around the city beautiful. I'm going to welcome Vicente Belen. Welcome to the show.
Hey.
Hey.
Thank you for having me.
This is how we see each other in, real life. We're like, what's up? How's it going?
Very real nice and everything.
Yeah. So let everybody know exactly, how long have you been playing the saxophone? You are a saxophonist.
I am a saxophonist. I do play multiple instruments, but I will say I've been playing the saxophone for about 10 years now.
Wow. So this has been one of those things that you've built on over the years. And obviously you have an amazing story, or you wouldn't be sitting here with me, because I already know this story. And I can tell you, it's very interesting to hear the paths that people take to get to where they are. So start from the very beginning, how you got your start. I know it was through your brother, right?
Yes. All right. So just to kind of drop a little musical background, I don't actually come from a family of musicians. My dad maybe studied opera when he was in university, and that kind of carried on with my brother joining the band in high school. So raised in Orlando, he in high school, I would watch him in his jazz concerts and his performances, and I was really young at the time, so I thought that was, very fun. The music was jazz, so it was very exciting, very, very dynamic. It's very crunchy. It's loaded with a lot of feelings and nuances. So maybe in middle school, I think I accidentally joined a music class. And it's very interesting how I got to that point.
Accidentally? Nobody accidentally ever really joins a music class.
It's funny. It was one of those things you fill out your class roster, and I ended up leaving space open, and my guidance counselor just kind of put me in this class. And it was general music, it was things learning how to play a guitar and understanding what notes on a piano were and how to read rhythms and how to read certain music. And then I think it was my 7th grade year, I actually joined the band. I actually put the effort to be in the band. I was, all right, let me do this because now I actually know what music is all about. And it reminded me how much, seeing my brother playing, how much that was very exciting.
So did they assign you an instrument? Because they assigned me a trumpet, and that did not go over so well.
Actually, they did. So check this out. I think a lot of the things with the saxophone players in middle school is that you have to play clarinet first. So they assigned me the clarinet, and man, did I not like the clarinet. It's very reminded me of it just didn't fit my vibe. It just didn't sound too of my essence there. But I ended up switching to the saxophone the next following year. And that summer going into that year is when my brother ended up finding out that I was in band. And he was like, hey, remember I was in band? Here's my saxophone. And it was like a passing on kind of this torch. And at the time, I never saw it that way. But he did take the time to when he was in Florida and at home for the month, he taught me what he knew and what he remembered and such.
So he was already in college at this point?
Yes, he was already in college, and he moved out already, and he just happened to be home for the month, and he taught me what he could. And I ended up auditioning for the top ensemble, and I made it. And things kind of started cooking from there, I'd say.
So I know that you play the saxophone, but you also play the flute.
Yes.
How did you get into the flute? Because when I saw you on Instagram that day, you just had a random reel come up, and you're like, I was like, wait a minute. I know you as a saxophonist.
Yes.
Not a flute player, so.
Yes.
Tell me this story.
It was actually 2 moments in my life that kind of got me to play the flute. Coming from a Venezuelan background, Venezuela has very rich music, and there's a style of music in Venezuela called joropo, which is very upbeat, very dancey, almost like a waltz. It's very, very fast, and there's a lot of flute in that, and it's almost like birds. The flute almost sounds like a bird kind of tweeting around, and the music is just very live. The second time ended up meeting a musician in town who was very well connected to a past musician named Dave Valentine, who was a very famous jazz flautist. And when I ended up playing with this piano player and found out that he was playing for Dave Valentine for so many years, it kind of inspired me. I was like, man, I should definitely really learned to pick up the flute. Because as a saxophonist, it's always kind of good to already kind of be a multi-instrumentalist.
Yeah.
Play the saxophone, play the flute, play the clarinet, play the bass clarinet, things like that. And the flute was just kind of like, it already kind of fit my essence. I was like, all right, this feels good, and I can do all kinds of things to it, and just speaks. So I ended up picking the flute.
Wow.
Yeah. I will say nobody taught me how to play the flute. Literally.
So no brother helped you out with the flute?
No brother, no sister, no student, no mentor, no college professor, nobody.
Wow.
I had hints here and there, maybe like some pieces of a little advice and such, but I just picked up the flute and I got it from a store really cheap, and I was like, I'm gonna make this work somehow, and I did.
Nice.
So,
How long have you been playing the flute now?
Over 2 years. It actually happened during the pandemic.
So many stories come from the pandemic. Hey, I got a dog. No, you're like, I got a flute, and I learned to play it, and it's been amazing. So you do play it very, very well. I have to give you credit for that, because I've already heard you play saxophone in person, but when I heard you play the flute that day, it was like, wow, okay, this kid is definitely talented. Wow. So you have this really cool story about how you went to your teacher's house and they taught you, he specifically, I think, taught you certain things with the saxophone.
Right. So
let's talk about that, because that's so cool, and I love hearing this.
Recapping on joining the band 8th grade year, and I ended up meeting a friend in school who I ended up looking up to, because he was much better than I am at the time, and it's kind of like one of those things, you buddy up with somebody who's maybe smarter than you or better than you, and you kind of learn as you go. But it's it's mutual. You both kind of learn. And I remember going into my freshman year in high school. He reminded me towards the end of the year, like, hey, there's this guitar teacher I want you to meet at our middle school that we used to go to. And I was like, okay, why would I go to my middle school to meet a guitar teacher? But it was one of those things, like, you listen to your gut. It just kind of felt right. Like, okay, let's sacrifice like the walk from the high school to the middle school, which is miles away in the Florida summer heat, and I'm playing the saxophone that at the time was probably half my size, and it's so heavy, and we didn't really know what we were getting into. But just remember that it was probably the last couple weeks of school, and it was like a Tuesday, and we decided to make the trip to the middle school. And I just remember how the story went, whereas keep in mind, the story is very prominent in my head, because it was a very enlightening moment in my life.
Yeah.
This teacher, we got there, I ended up meeting him, and he was just very nice. He was introducing very well, and my name is Mr. Vincent, and I play guitar. And I'm like, oh, nice to meet you. And he's like kind of talking to me, and he's kind of like, oh, what do you have there in your hand? And I say, oh, it's a saxophone. He's like, can I see it? And my mindset at the time, because you're a kid. Kids, like when you're young, like the way you think sometimes is so, because the world kind of does that to you, makes you want to not think creatively.
Yeah.
This guy had no idea. Pulls out the saxophone, pulls out a mouthpiece from his drawer, asks me for a reed, and he just kind of starts assembling the horn. And in my head, I'm like, there's no way he knows what he's doing, right? This is crazy. He starts playing, and that was it right there. That was it. The moment where I was like, this is it. Like, I want to play saxophone for a living.
Wow.
Maybe not even for a living, but something about just saxophone was like life. It's like, that's what I want to do. That's it. Nothing can question me if I'm going to play saxophone anymore. Whether it's professional or non-professional, it's like, I just want to play the saxophone. And it was one of those things where he played. I was very inspired. He taught me a couple things, showed me a couple songs.
What did he play, though? What genre?
Man, he was playing jazz, like bebop, very swingy, like like just really quick and super jazz. Like, it was just, he knew what he was doing. And he kind of told me, he was like, yeah, I played saxophone for 27 years, and I'm from Texas, and I studied for 9 years at the University of Texas A&M and such, and it was incredible. And his whole story, and kind of seeing what discipline looks like, and also what passion is. He played the guitar, but he also still played saxophone. But he played the guitar to kind of pick something else up and be a teacher and things like that. So that's just kind of like the essence that I got from him,
Yeah, I mean, so your gut was right for that long haul in the summer heat, for sure.
Yeah, was the sweat worth it? Definitely. I'll tell you that. It was really hot outside, yeah.
I bet. Yeah. So when you started getting into the scene, like, I've seen you around at brunches, at really high-end parties. You add an element when you play your saxophone to the party itself. And I know that you play with the music, but, how did you get into that scene, and when did that happen for you? Because it was recently, right?
Interesting, yeah. we can definitely just say again, it's one of those pandemic moments once again.
It's like, you know, we're bad and we're upset that there was a pandemic, but low-key kind of happy there was.
Yeah.
Because, hello, where would you be, you know?
It's like there's both sides of the coin with things. So I will say pre-pandemic, I ended up going to Miami for the trip for a friend. We had an acquaintance who was from Ecuador. Shout out Diana Sofia. She had a premiere on The Voice, and we were watching her premiere with her on TV of The Voice, and it was a whole thing. And I ended up going to like Miami Club for the first time and seeing what things like were in Miami, what the music scene was like. And for the first time that I ever see in a nightclub a saxophone player, and it seemed like to be like a Miami thing, whether it was like electronic music or Spanish reggaeton or like even a conglomeration of the two. It was just different. So I ended up picking up like a cruise gig when the pandemic was starting. And as soon as the pandemic started, the cruise gig ended and I had to come off board, and I ended up learning the flute. And then I ended up hitting a buddy up who I saw was posting about a brunch event that he started hosting in downtown. And shout out Mac by Lux Media Events. It's called Brunch in the City. It was just an advertised event I saw on Instagram one day. I literally just DM'd him and said, hey, I think adding a saxophone to this kind of event with the DJ would be something different. Nobody's ever seen this. I know for a fact he took a leap of faith the same way I did, because I didn't know it was gonna happen, neither did he.
This wasn't a paid gig for you.
Oh no, this was like for free. Like,
You're like, listen,
like
I want to do this. Let me try it out. Let me hook you up. You hook me up. I'll do it for you.
Oh yeah.
Like,
I just give me the place, give me the DJ, somebody with the sound, and I'll just come in and play my saxophone. And it was a hit. I was playing R&B, I was playing hip hop hits, I was playing soca, island vibes, all kinds of stuff. And maybe at first I didn't know all the songs, but the songs I did know, I was nailing them, and everybody was very up. It really elevated the whole vibe of the venue. Everybody was enjoying themselves, it was really different.
Well, I think it really changes a lot of things because, people like live music.
Yes.
And when you're in an environment where there's live music, the feeling is just different versus there's nothing wrong with a DJ, obviously, especially a very good DJ, which we know a lot of. But, when you put in that live element, it just it brings the room to life, so to speak.
Most definitely.
But, when you started playing, so you started this one for free, and then you're like, when did things start really taking off for you? Was it like a week later, a month later, a year later?
I think maybe about like half a year, about 6 months in, I was picking up more gigs and trying out different bands and playing with reggae bands and playing with samba bands and doing more solo work, maybe like a solo gig at a corporate event, maybe playing like cocktail jazz hours, or playing at places like Estefan's Kitchen, which I did in Margaritaville. And that's kind of like maybe 6 months in when it's like, okay, now I can organize a set list of songs I can really do, and I know what's kind of up to date, what's been coming out, and I can have my audio equipment really set up well, and I already know how to maneuver through the certain venues when I do get there. And that's when things were really popping, because it was the fluidity. I just had to get used to it. I've never done it, so I had to get used to that. Being a solo person, showing out with a DJ. And keep in mind, I'm working with different DJs, and DJs are just like musicians. They function differently. Some switch up songs a little faster. Some do let things play out. Some have these sequences that you start to pick up on every gig. You start to notice like, okay, he has this vibe, and he's gonna go here. And this is gonna do this to this crowd, and it's gonna do this. It's the same thing. You just kind of have to get used to it. Maybe a new drummer, a new piano player, a new bass player. Everybody feels differently. So you just gotta feel them out. So yeah, about 6 months in, I remember it started branching out from just the brunches. I started playing in more nightclub scenes as well. And there was already kind of a scene for that with the saxophone, but it was very rare. It was only like 2 people literally in town that would do that. And at the time, those kind of people, they just kind of were doing different things, and it opened up an avenue for me to kind of, okay, now the road's clear, let me drive. Right? And I took advantage of that. And people were seeing how I can add to the environment. Whatever genre, whatever night, if I'm there, it's gonna elevate things. And that's kind of how it happened, like that.
So you read music and you play by ear, obviously, or do you have sheet music on all these hip hop and R&B and soca songs that you play with? Because I've heard you go from, Michael Jackson to, Migos to Megan Thee Stallion. I'm like, who is this kid? You can't possibly have all that sheet music.
No, a lot of that I actually learned by ear and just repetition and just listening to it. Yeah.
So do you kind of, because I was wondering this one night when I saw you play, I was like, is he adding his own musical touch where it would, because it sounded great with the music, I didn't know if that was something that you just kind of listen for and you kind of feel it at that point, or is that something that you try to plan ahead?
It's a combination of the two, Coming from a jazz background, I studied jazz music for many years, and that's kind of where I get my harmonic ideas or things kind of like that, where I can get my improvisational concepts from. It is a lot of improvisation, as well as the fact that you do want to kind of come in with structure and give people something to riff off. The same way you hear, this is Carlos Santana, boom, ba-da-boom. That line, that guitar line is so, everybody knows that.
Yeah.
As soon as that happens, it's like, okay. That's the kind of same idea. You want to come with somebody that, you want to come at them with ideas that can stick, something that they can relate off of, And it's a mixture of the two. So I'll play kind of nuances or things that give touch, details, maybe some color to the music, and then maybe tackle on the melody and play the melody out loud through the saxophone. Because I know people have definitely never heard the melody coming out of the saxophone.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I noticed that a lot of people too, and I wondered how it felt on your end, but when a lot of people are in a venue and they're just dancing around you and vibing to the beat and to the music that you're playing along with this beat, what does that feel like for you as a musician?
I think the goal of any musician is to get an effect from people, whether it's negative, whether it's positive, whether it's very expressive, or very conservative, kind of just more enjoying it, just laying back. The idea is to get some kind of a reaction. But anytime people are dancing to your music, that's honestly probably the best thing that can happen. If people dancing to your music, I don't think there's any better thing that could happen than that.
So the ultimate goal for you is to get all the pretty girls to dance around you, obviously. Not everybody, having a good time, but especially the ladies, All right, so, whenever you talk about things that you're doing, I am going to ask you to play your saxophone in just a few minutes for everybody waiting on the show to hear him play. He will be playing momentarily. But, you've built this into a certain thing. You're still in college too. You're a botany major?
Yes. So that's another thing that came from actually the pandemic again. I was going to school for music for a little bit, and something in I guess more like my gut, like I'd say, just wasn't speaking to me when I said go to school for music. I know a lot of people sometimes do go to school for music, and everybody has a different viewpoint with it. But I thought I'd rather get the real life experience, put myself there, make myself uncomfortable. You have to do things like that in order to kind of get the blessings that can come out of a lot of things that you push through, Was it comfortable doing my first gigs? Definitely not. The scene, I was that young in nightclubs or in bars that were closing at 2, and everybody is 10 years older plus than I am. No, it didn't make sense. Back in the day, though, it made sense a lot. It's people like Charlie Parker or John Coltrane or different saxophone players like maybe even Kenny G. I know he started in New York scene when he was young, and he'd start going up and taking trips there and just putting himself there. And that's honestly the thing that needs to happen with a lot of musicians is just put yourself somewhere you've never been. It is uncomfortable, but that's what being different is,
Yeah.
So it's get in the flow of things. It's a highway flying by, but you get sucked into it, but then you can really start to maneuver your way and pick up things as you go. So
what are you doing right now? Like, I know you have a lot of things coming up for the end of the year, but in the summertime, I know that you've been working, you did a few things with some people over at Full Sail where they produced some music. So what other things are you looking forward to?
Yes. So now I'm in school. I'm returning to school, and I am going to be a botany major. So it's plant science.
And to give credit to your father,
Yes.
he was a botanist as well. I believe?
Yes, he was an agricultural engineer.
Agriculture engineer.
Yes.
There we go.
So I kind of picked that up from him, you know. And I also find it very interesting. I love nature and things like that.
Same.
So
Farmer's daughter, I get it.
farmer's daughter.
Well, specifically with ferns, so I understand what you're talking about.
Yes.
It's like something that you just, it's how you're raised, so it's in you, so you're naturally interested in it, but then you have these other passions, like mine was weather and music, so it's like I kind of just drifted off and did my own thing, but a lot of it based from how I grew up. So
Exactly.
So now you're going back to school.
So school and working with more artists. So I ended up doing some music at Full Sail. There is some collaboration music that I have released with a couple buddies at Full Sail, some music videos I have out there. Just recently I did perform with an international artist. Her name was Claudia Leite. She's really huge. She's worked with stars like Pitbull, Shakira, Jennifer Lopez.
Wow.
She's really well known as of recently from the last FIFA World Cup.
Yes.
She sang a very famous song that is to this day. She did a tour about a month ago at Epcot and Disney, and I played at that tour with her. So I'm a part of her
I remember
American
seeing
band.
that on your story, on your Instagram
Yes.
story, and I thought, wow. I bet that was kind of like exhilarating for you.
Oh, that's definitely, I'd say, the most recent, most important
Fangirl
thing.
moment you
Yeah.
had? Debbie, you had a fangirl
wow.
moment. You had to get it out of your system, right?
Yeah, cool. Definitely, my most recent achievement was definitely playing with Claudia Leite on a stage like that, and that kind of put me on a more international map. And I'm looking forward to playing with her again, really recently. She also works with another artist named Yvette Sangelo, and she's also a huge Brazilian artist. So hopefully, maybe soon in the future, you might see me on a stage with the both of them.
Yeah.
Or just in general.
That would be awesome. So you do a mixture of jazz, Latin.
Latin, reggaeton, EDM. It could be house. It could be reggae. It could be pop music. It could be samba.
True musician.
Oh my
You're
goodness. It could be
eclectic.
salsa, merengue, anything.
So good music is good music.
Good music is good music.
I agree with that. That's why
yes.
I mean, obviously I have my favorite genres that I attach to, but
Right.
when it comes to music, good music is good music.
Oh, yeah.
I love blues.
Yes.
Blues music is that's just a different experience when you get to a live situation, or even in your car, but live blues music is just bar none one of my favorites.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So why don't you go ahead and I want to hear you play because you didn't come here just to sit there and let the saxophone sit on the
So you're
table.
pretty.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Oh, wow. Okay.
what type of saxophone is this?
So this is a tenor saxophone from a company called Selmer, which is a French company.
And is this the same one that your brother gave you?
No, that one's at home. It kind of became like an archived thing, like a sitting trophy.
Yeah.
Because it means a lot dear to me, so I kind of keep it there,
Does he know that?
Yes, he does. And he probably doesn't take it as serious as I do, but I let him know, like, hey man, like that little thing you did, yeah, remember that.
Look at me now. bro.
Yeah. Look at me now.
All right, so let me hear it because I've heard it, but I want everyone listening and watching this podcast to hear and experience the Vicente Belen experience that you got going on here.
Yeah, so a little bit behind this story actually with this horn. I was playing a student model with my high school for about 2 years when I first started gigging. And once I graduated, I didn't have a saxophone. So I didn't know what was I gonna have for a while. Actually, I went like a whole 4 months. It's almost like going without a car for 4 months. So literally, how am I gonna get it around? How am I gonna do anything? A buddy of mine recommended me this. Hey, maybe try this. I didn't try yet. I tried like 10 other horns. Nothing worked. Check that. And then I played this one time and it made sense to me. And it just played.
So is this different from the saxophone that your brother gave you?
Yes, this is a tenor. The other one my brother gave me is an alto saxophone.
Ah.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit smaller, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of like Maceo Parker, if you know what it is. Yeah, if you know. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Well, I can just tell you, Riff on This feels 10 times fancier now that you just did that. I feel very, very swanky, and that's just it's such a romantic instrument to play. So thank you so much for coming on the show, and for playing your saxophone, and for telling your story, because I think it's sincerely amazing. Tell people how they can get connected with you on social media.
Awesome. So you can find me on Instagram primarily. It's VICENTE_L. B as in boy, D as in dog, R, right? So it's VICENTE_LBDR. On my Instagram page in my bio, you can actually find a link tree. Is where there's links to book me. There's links to find any events that's coming up that you can get on Eventbrite and such. I have an event coming up on the 17th at Grand Bohemian. It's a cocktail hour jazz. So if you like jazz, cocktail hours, and Grand Bohemian, it's the perfect venue for that.
It is.
Please come out.
Plus they have that nice piano in the bar area too. So I can't wait to see the setup that they have for that. I think it's going to be amazing.
It's going to be perfect. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, my friend, for coming out here today and spending your time with me. I really do appreciate you and your musical talents.
Thank you so much.
No problem. That's going to do it for this episode of Riff on This. Be sure to stay locked in tight. We have another episode coming up shortly. Thanks for listening to Riff on This. A huge thank you to our special guest, Vicente Belen. Be sure to follow him on Instagram under Vicente, VICENTE_LBDR, or you can look him up on Facebook by searching Vicente Belen. Don't forget, you can link me on my social media. Just search Samara Coquinas News 6 on Facebook and Twitter. On Instagram, search Samara Coquinas. Before we go, a huge thank you to our behind-the-scenes production team, Derek Mosier, Ryan Haley, Chris Flora, and Rich Burns. Please take some time to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. And don't forget, sharing is caring, so tell a friend about us too. You can find videos of all the podcast episodes on clickorlando.com/riff on this. Until next time, friends.